I mentioned my welcome to everyone at the start. Please remember what it's like to be new to a community. Please remember what it's like if you've had to travel abroad to work or to school. There are over 400 new students in our community today, and we have a responsibility to extend a hand of friendship and support to them at all times, but especially when they're new to our community. It's the start of the year, and so it's a good time for me to reiterate to you my personal commitment to you and my personal expectations of you. My personal commitment is this: I will always put your voice front and centre of my decision making. Pupil voice, student voice, the voice of young people is, I believe, central to the development of good schools. I expect you to use that voice with responsibility and with dignity, but even if you hold a position that is different to mine, I will consider it and I will treat it with respect. My expectations of you are that you are respectful of everyone in the community, that you are accepting, no matter what the person's background, of every view within the community, and that you are kind. You should expect me to stop you and ask you how you are. I expect you to respond. I'm doing it genuinely. I expect the same thing from you. And if you're not well, if you're not in a good place, it's okay to say to someone. And that's an expectation as well. There's a lot of support. I've already identified the safeguarding team. You have group tutors. You have the teams in houses, assistant housemasters and mistresses, housemasters and mistresses, and there is the chaplain as well. And you've seen all the people around you. There's also the prefects, and I'd ask them very briefly to stand up, please. We've got a prefect body. Could you stand up? Thank you very much. Okay. There's our prefect team. Thank you very much. Please take a seat. One of their responsibility is to act as mentors, to support you, to challenge you, certainly, but to support you. And if you're in difficulty, then please do speak to one of our prefects. I want to speak to you in about 4 minutes about the need for balance. I think that we are in danger of losing our balance a little bit in this country. Balance is not always calm and positive. I think balance needs to exist in life, it needs to exist in all schools, and it needs to exist in each and every individual's existence. And I want to show you why. Balance involves challenge, it involves difference, it involves disagreement. Diversity and challenge are a good thing. Otherwise, we exist in an echo chamber. Or, new term to me today, we find ourselves in a situation of cultural tribalism. Put another way, if you surround yourself with people who think the same thing as you, then you will probably become out of touch. And you will certainly not be challenged in your thinking. Neither of those are good things. I'm going to speak more to you when we're at Wells Cathedral next week on my expectations of you to question and challenge in school. I look forward to that, but back to balance. It's too evident, sadly, in what we see in world leaders, that they have lost their sense of balance. In America, there is repeated evidence from leadership of a desire to crush opposition through belittling language. There is an assumption that if you belittle your opposition, they will go away and everything will be better. Even in the UK yesterday, we saw our own leader and his government make the threat of deselecting members of Parliament purely based on a difference of views. I would argue that that is to lose balance, and that is a dangerous route to go down. A good school is one where there is balance, where balance is fostered and it's evident. And remember, it can be cuddly, but it isn't always. Yesterday, the 2nd of September, for many, many people around the world, was the first day of school. I'm sure that you approach that with mixed emotions. I hope there's excitement there. I'm sure there's a desire to catch up with friends. I'm sure there's the anticipation of learning. But I acknowledge that in some ways you may feel slightly frustrated at having to give up what has been a wonderful summer holidays. I get that. But leave those mixed emotions to one side. And let's consider Cameroon in West Africa. For some 600,000 children, for roughly 3 years, they have not had any access to education at all. They're in northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon which speak English. The rest of Cameroon speaks French. And about 3 years ago, the government sought to make French the language of education. This was the catalyst for dissent in those northwest and southwest regions. And the separatists there, who now want a separate state, argue that teaching in French in schools which are historically English-speaking is a desire by the government to extinguish, to belittle the culture of those English-speaking areas. I'm not in a position to pass comment on that. I just give you the facts as I understand them. The schools themselves have become targets. They're soft targets, aren't they? Schools tend to be in one place, they tend not to move, they tend to follow pretty regimented timetables, and so they've become a target for separatists. And separatists have sought to shut down schools and have done so successfully for 600,000 children over 3 years. Recently, when one head teacher sought to defy the ban and open his school, he and all of the school children were abducted. Luckily, they were released some way afterwards. If you shut a school, then children are not in schooling. Your opportunity to influence and to connect with them is gone. Also, it is easier for them to be radicalized, for them to be recruited as child soldiers. And if you add in particularly the death of parents, which is routine, the children resent the death of their parents quite reasonably, and it is all the easier still to radicalize them. Cameroon has one of the biggest populations of child soldiers in the world. I have a real worry that history tends to repeat itself. 25 years ago, I started my career, before I was a teacher, working in Sri Lanka. There was a long-running civil war. It was based entirely on language. The government had said all schools must teach Sinhala. The people of the north who spoke Tamil language felt disenfranchised. That led to civil war. History repeats itself unless you do something different. Unless, in the words of Greta Thunberg, as I told you last term, you panic. Do something different. I think education is valuable. It's important. There needs to be challenge in schools. There needs to be acceptance. There needs to be difference. There needs to be balance. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? I've told you about our leaders. I've told you about schooling generally. But what does that look like in Millfield? I think balance is competition and challenge. Competition is healthy in business. If businesses exist without competition, they tend to stultify, they tend to become sluggish. You get this from your sports, don't you? In girls' hockey, what would a season be without the game against Repton? In boys' rugby, what would a season be without the game against Sedbergh or the Rosslyn Park Sevens? We might not necessarily like our opposition. That's for you to decide. But the competition is something we look forward to. The competition makes us stronger. And it should be true in schools generally as well. Where does that challenge come from? Where does that competition come from? In class, it comes from inside. Many of you are deeply self-motivated. It comes from your peers. It comes from your teachers. One of our academic priorities this year is to help you, to challenge you, to make more use of the feedback that you are being given. We will give you space to do that. We will give you instruction in how to do that, but we expect you to do it. We expect you to improve based on feedback. You cannot be perfect at the first iteration. Again, you know that from your sport, don't you? Balance is diversity and difference. in all areas of life, especially in-house. And that leads on to a pastoral priority that we have, which is to improve and to keep improving our integration within this school. Just because someone thinks something different to you doesn't make them less worthy. In fact, you should seek out difference. Otherwise, your life will become an echo chamber. If someone has a different sexual orientation to you, you should seek that out. You should learn from them. You should understand their perspective, because if you do that, you will become a stronger person. If you seek to crush your opponents by belittling, you will be monochromatic and you will wither. Balance comes in food. I don't know if you saw the shocking story. There's a serious part to this, but the shocking story, which I think was on the BBC this morning and in the Daily Star, I saw it in the BBC, the shocking story of the boy who is now at the point of being registered blind because of a lack of vitamins brought about by only eating chips, Pringles, white sliced bread, and the occasional piece of meat. On the one hand, there's something quite sort of laughable in that, but on the other hand, I presume that child has felt forced to make those decisions. There's a lack of balance there. A light moment for a second. I met some lovely Year 9s today, and I was horrified. I was horrified because they didn't know what rhubarb was. Don't know quite how we got onto the topic of rhubarb. I was then further horrified when talking to Denis Verrier, the general manager for Chartwells, that we do not have rhubarb on our menu here at Millfield. I feel that this is a cultural imperative that you all understand about rhubarb, and so next Tuesday, for one day only, the pastry chef has kindly agreed to do rhubarb tarts and a bit of a display. Life is about balance. Love that rhubarb when it comes next week. Well, I'm glad that rhubarb got the laugh. At least you've woken up, that's great. Should we as a community have a day of the week without meat? Should we have meat-free Mondays? How would you feel about that? Excellent, you've woken up twice. This is good. So, balance exists in well-being as well. It exists in the prominence that you give sleep. You only benefit from work and effort if you plan rest and recovery. When you rest, when you recover, that is when you develop and grow. You can put as much effort in as you like, but if you do not plan rest and recovery, you will not develop, you will not grow. You need to think about rest as being as important as lessons and training. Or put another way, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But before you jump to an easy out, that does require some work before the play. A life without balance is futile. Balance needs to be sought. It's not always easy. It's not always cuddly and comfortable, although it can be. I wish you a happy, successful, and balanced term. Please stand.